You know, I have people coming to me on the tours and they say, look, we were up at Foundation Park this afternoon. I was there with my son and he started behaving strangely. I said, how old's your son? Oh, he's 10 years of age. And I'll tell them a story, even though it's not specifically on my tour. I'll tell them a story about Foundation Park if they bring it up. And I'll just say to them, well, look, there were gangs in Sydney from about 1804 until the First World War. They were the Push. And your son was actually in Foundation Park. He's 10 years of age. Well, in 1820, the Push gangs that would mug people and kill them, right? Wow. They were called the Push because they'd go into pubs and bars in a V formation and they'd physically push everyone out of the way. Now, they consisted of young men who were known as larrikins, young women who were known as donnas. The donnas were ladies of the night, right? They were bait.
Donnas, okay.
They were bait. They were for attracting young men that the Push were going to mug, right? Simple as that. Wow. Very, very evil stuff, right? Yeah. Now, the Push had another policy, and that was if anyone witnessed a Push crime, they would kill them. Right.
Oh,
this 10-year-old boy witnessed a Push crime. His age made no difference to them. They threw him at the age of 10 head first off a cliff in Foundation Park, killed him. Right. His mother, young mother in her 20s at the time, died of shock several days later. Now the security guys, the rock security forces, of a night when they walk through Foundation Park, they actually claim they often see a young woman weeping on one of the benches. And when they approach her, she fades away.
Get out.
Now, many people believe that is the ghost of this poor boy's mother. Now, that crime was so nasty that even the Push felt a little bit guilty about it. Not they felt guilty about too many things, but even some of those guys had turned up to the boy's funeral. But that just shows you the ruthlessness of those gangs. They were wicked. And they'd attract that when the young Marines and the young sailors and the young whalers would pull into the harbour. And the young donnas would go down to the boats. And obviously these were young men. Sex drive was high. They'd been out to sea for months. They were cashed up, probably desiring a bit of female intimacy. Yeah. And the girls would approach them and offer them a good time. And they'd lure them up the alleyways, places like the Suez Canal. I always take people to the Suez Canal and I tell them about the Push, because the Push turn up in different forms in the tour. And they'd lure these young men up the alleyways, offering them a good time. Then when I got to an intersection, they'd signal to their mates, the larrikins. Larrikins would come out. They would do something called sandbagging. Well, now, sandbagging is where you have a sock packed tight with sand and you beat the poor young man would be beaten unconscious or beaten to death. And I always say to the group, why do you think they use the sock filled with sand? Some people come up with it. But the reason they did that is it was a concealed weapon, because what they would do is they'd empty the sand out of the sock and they'd put the sock back on their foot, or they'd put the sock back on the foot of the victim. So when the cops turned up, as they would, and they'd see the dead or unconscious young man, and the Push gang members would never run from the scene of a crime. They'd just hang around looking cool or pretend they were good Samaritans or whatever. They were pretty deviant. And the cops would automatically search the Push guy, member, for weaponry. And when they searched him for weaponry, he had no weaponry. So there was no evidence that he had a club or he had an instrument for belting this guy unconscious or killing him. And so they had no grounds for taking him to court. Nothing.
Yeah.
So they were cunning. They had all these little cunning methods. And that even ties in to an extent with my own personal history, because my grandfather went down to the rocks when he was about 20 years of age. That would have been 1923. And in those days, you really had to have your wits about you, because if you didn't know the ropes around there, and if you couldn't identify the Push, who normally dressed well, by the way, they were
three-piece suits and
they looked good.
Yeah.
They didn't
little
look like
pocket watches and stuff.
Exactly. I could show you a photograph of them right now, and they look like they're members of a gentleman's club.
Yeah.
You never ever get the impression that they were thugs or
just everyday citizens.
They would look like respectable citizens. That was part of their stick, their ploy.
Wow. Okay.
And a couple of these blokes approached him, and they said to him, "Have you got a match, mate?" Right. And he automatically, because what one of their techniques was, you'd go to be a good Samaritan, you'd go to light this bloke's pipe. They'd belt you over the back of the head. They're nasty. And he recognised who they were, and he said, "Well, match me." And he's a good short distance runner, and he ran up George Street, and they chased him. They didn't get him, otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you now. So, that was a sort of, I think about that. I think, well, God's sake, I mean, that was my own family's direct connection with the Push.
Yeah. And now you're talking about it.
Talking about these guys.